What's up? This is Cool Wave. I'm a sound designer, and I think Invader 2 is the most underrated synth plugin out there, especially since it's only $6. Overall, it sounds great, and it has some extra features that allow you to make modern, spacey analog sounds and beyond. I'm going to do an overview and tutorial. I'll also make some presets you can download for free, and on top of that, I'm going to give you a coupon code to download Patch Invader 4, my preset bank for Invader 2 for free. Invader 2 is a virtual analog synth plugin. You've got several different wave shapes for your oscillators, including 2 dedicated sync oscillators. You have 2 low pass filters. Low pass filter 1 is more clean, while low pass filter 2 is more raw and can get saturated with this additional drive knob. You also have a band pass filter, filter envelope, amp envelope, 2 LFO'S with LFO1 being polyphonic. You have a sub oscillator, ring modulation, noise. Ring modulation allows you to create really cool bell sounds or textured kind of, FM type sounds. One of my favorite features is that the Unison is polyphonic. You can make some great sounds with it. You have several different delay types. Ping pong delay, tape delay, diffusion delay, which is like a reverb mixed with the delay, and you have 2 phase delay, which are phaser type effects. You have an arpeggiator sequencer section, Modwheel, and Aftertouch. Oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 are identical. You have triangle, saw, pulse with a pulse width knob, sync pull. So this is a self-contained hard sync oscillator. In most synthesizers, you have to hard sync one oscillator to another. What this allows is for you to do hard sync all within one oscillator and have the other oscillator running independently, doing its own thing. That's the sync knob. Sync saw. Saw to pulse. So this is a variable wave shape where you start with the saw all the way at the bottom and then it morphs into a pulse wave. Synthesizers like the Mini Moog and Invader 2 use a system for defining the octaves that was derived from pipe organs. So instead of being, at 0, 1 octave up, 1 octave below, 8 is basically middle, 4 is 1 octave up, 16 is 1 octave below. The frequency knob allows you to change the pitch by cents and semitones. Double clicking will return any knob to its default position. This slider controls the phase offset for the oscillator. By default, it's at 50%. So that means it will start halfway through its waveform phase cycle. If you want it to start at the beginning all the time, you can move it to 0. If you want it to start at the end, you can move it to 100. Up here you have oscillator restart. If this is off, Invader 2 will function like an analog synthesizer where the oscillators and components are constantly moving. If you turn this on, it will start at the same point wherever you choose the phase offset to be. For bass sounds, it can be a good idea to have this on and have this at 0. That allows for your sound to have a uniform starting point and it sounds more in line, each note to the other. The sub oscillator has 3 shapes: triangle, saw, square. By default, the sub oscillator plays 1 octave below wherever oscillator 1 is set at. You can also move it 2 octaves below. One great thing about Invader 2 is that even though the sub follows whatever octave oscillator 1 is set at, it does not follow the fine pitch. You could detune oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, and the sub oscillator will stay right down the middle. With most synthesizers, the sub oscillator follows everything you change on oscillator 1 pitch-wise. On other synths, if you had oscillator 1 at -8 cents, the sub-oscillator would be set to -8 cents. So your tuning is probably going to be a little off to the left because you have these two following that, and then only oscillator 2 tuned a little bit to the right. Ring modulation multiplies oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. You can use it to get metallic bell-like sounds and other type of textures. One cool thing is you can mute both oscillators. The ring modulation will work on its own. You can blend it with oscillator 1, oscillator 2. Then you have noise, pretty self-explanatory. You can use noise to fill out a sound, make it sound a little more full, cover a little wider frequency range. You're making kind of thinner sounds. And then obviously you can turn it up higher, bring the noise more up front to give you more of a textured sound, or make it sound lo-fi, vintage, whatever. Finally, you have the main output volume. Over here is the filter section. Low pass filter 1 has a cutoff knob. With a low pass filter, anything that is below this cutoff point passes through the filter, and everything above gets cut off. Resonance. What this does is it creates a peak and a little high-end boost right around this cutoff point. The resonance is also self-oscillating. Filter envelope. By default, this knob is set to 50. I think it should be set to 0. And that way you're not having it take effect by default even if you don't plan on using it. So what the filter envelope does is basically gives you this second envelope and an amount knob to shape your sound, create more dynamic movement, and make the sound feel more alive. The filter envelope is used a lot when you're making pads, but you can also use it to make synth brass, bass sounds, and other stuff. Let's say you have your cutoff at 0. You're not going to hear anything. But if you increase this filter envelope knob and mess with this, you're basically opening this filter and then partially or fully closing it based on where you have this filter envelope section set up. Key tracking. What this knob does is it will either open or close the filter based on what keys on the keyboard you're playing. Anything above middle C on the keyboard will open the filter, and the higher up you go on the keyboard, the more it will open it. If you play below middle C on the keyboard, it will close the filter slightly, and it will close it more the lower you play on the keyboard. So let's have key tracking off, play a higher key on So you see, the more I increased key tracking, the more the filter opened up and the sound got brighter, even though I was hitting the same key. Same concept goes for playing lower on the keyboard. So we got key tracking back at 0. The more you turn up the key tracking knob, the more the filter starts to close as I'm playing a lower bass note on the keyboard. And then you have a high pass filter knob. You have to turn it on or it won't work. So what a high pass filter does is basically anything above the cutoff point will pass through the filter and you can hear it. Anything below the cutoff point is going to be cut and you're not going to be able to hear it. I would have liked for there not to be this on button. If you turn the knob, and you forget to have this on, nothing's going to happen. I forgot to mention, low pass filter 1 is supposed to be more of a clean filter. Moving on to low pass filter 2 is supposed to be more of a raw, aggressive filter. So it has all of the same knobs except for this final knob. Instead of a high pass filter, you have drive. Filter drive basically boosts the audio level before hitting the filter. So that gives you some extra saturation, punch, and can go into aggressiveness. So again, you have to turn this on in order for it to do anything. It's more subtle than a distortion or overdrive. It also rolls off some of the high frequencies as you get into higher values of drive. You can use this on bass sounds. You could also use it on keys. You can make kind of fake synthesized guitar sounds with it. Bandpass filter. What a bandpass filter is, wherever your cutoff point is set, the audio around this band at the cutoff point to pass through and be heard, and everything else gets cut off. I hardly ever use a bandpass filter. It would be really sweet if they added a notch filter, which is basically the opposite of a bandpass filter. You have two envelopes, attack envelope, filter envelope. Attack is how long it takes after you press a key for your sound to go from 0 volume to full volume. If you have your attack set at 0, as soon as you hit a key, it's going to play instantly. If you increase the attack, it's going to take 2.6 seconds for it to reach full volume after you hit a key. Next up is decay. So what that means is how long after you hit a key does the sound start going down in volume. Decay and sustain kind of have this combined relationship. So let's bring sustain all the way to 0. So if your decay is at 0, right after you hit a key, the sound's going down. Move it up a bit. You know, you could get more plucky sounds all the way up to the top. Sustain determines what volume is your sound going to sustain at after the decay happens. So if it's at 0, after these 327 milliseconds, your sound's going to 0. If it's at 100, you're still going to stay at 100% full volume. So if you hold down the key forever, sound's going to play forever. Release. What this is, how long it takes after you let go of a key does the sound fade to 0. Your release is at 0. It's going to 0 right away. Turn it up here. It's going to take 8.4967 seconds for your sound to go to 0. V is for velocity sensitivity. When V is at 0, no matter how soft or hard you hit a key, it's always going to play at the same volume. Turn all the way up to 100, going to have 100% velocity sensitivity depending on how soft or hard you hit a key. Filter envelope, I went over a bit earlier, a separate envelope from the amp envelope, and this controls the function of the filter combined with the filter envelope knob. So for a pad, what you'll do is you will set the attack of the filter envelope to be longer than the attack of the amp envelope. You'll set the decay, sustain, and release to be a little bit faster or shorter than the amp envelope. LFO1, LFO2, they are identical except for the fact that LFO1 is polyphonic, LFO2 is monophonic. When it's a polyphonic LFO, each key you hit on the keyboard has its own LFO assigned to it. So the LFO is going to start and run through its cycle with each key you hit. When it's monophonic, all of the keys are basically attached to a single LFO. Over here you have a tempo sync button. So what this does is it syncs the frequency to your DAW tempo. I would say about 99% of the time I always have this engaged. The only time I'll have this off is if I want to set the frequency to be really slow, or like kind of to do like a pitch drift type thing with the LFO. This, when it's on, means that your LFO will start its cycle of the waveform every time you hit a key. I like to have this on most of the time. That way your sound has the modulation of the LFO, but it still doesn't sound like super random and kind of a little out of place. Every key kind of works in conjunction with the starting point of the LFO. If you want your LFO to be more unpredictable and mimic that of a hardware analog synthesizer, you would have this off. And what that means is your LFO is just constantly running 100% of the time. When you hit a key, it's just going to catch the LFO wherever it's at. So you have sine, triangle, saw, pulse, random, noise. These are all bipolar by default. So what bipolar means is, let's say you map LFO to the frequency. Increase this. It's moving the knob right and left, right and left. That's what bipolar means. Even though you have a positive value, it's going back and forth. For saw unipolar, pulse unipolar, what unipolar means is if you have your value set to positive modulation, it's only going to move the knob right, back, and then back to the middle. If you have it going down, it's going to go left, back to the middle. Most of the time, I like to have it set for bipolar when I'm doing pitch drift or vibrato. That way it keeps the sound more in the pocket because it's not moving all the way to the right and not going to the left at all. But there are times, like when you're doing pulse width modulation, you may want it to be unipolar. So you're only increasing the pulse width and going back to your starting point, and you're not going back down to zero. Okay, the delay knob, that means is how soon or how long does it take for the LFO to kick in after you hit a key. If the delay is at 0, as soon as you hit a key, the LFO is going to start working and modulating. Let's say you move it up to 226 milliseconds. It's going to take that much time for the LFO to kick in. Another thing you can modulate with the LFO is the filter. I do wish you can modulate more stuff with the LFO and not just these 5 sections. It would be really cool if you can modulate the ring mod. You can modulate sync, Unison. What I really like about Invader 2 is it has polyphonic unison. What that means is even though you increase the unison voices to 2, 4, 6, or these combinations, you could still play polyphonically. You have this detune knob. This does is as you increase this, it's going to detune each of the 6 voices away from each other. The detune is one of those things where you have to mess with it to kind of find that sweet spot to where it's not too much. It's still in the pocket, but it sounds really lush. What the stereo knob does, when you increase it, it's going to split each voice in the stereo field. So when it's at 0, everything's still, you know, just functioning as regular left, right, but you hear each voice is independently either fully to the left or fully to the right. FX section, you have standard delay, ping pong delay, fusion delay, tape delay, phase delay 1, phase delay 2. This is standard delay. I always like to have it tempo synced, and then your times go from 1/64th to 1 bar. Oh yeah, let's turn up the mix knob. What's cool is this kind of, even though it's a standard delay, all of them kind of mimic like how a tape echo works. If you move it, kind of has this really cool warp effect as you're adjusting the time. Feedback, how intense each delay is. If you have it set really low, delay is going to end up fading away pretty quick. You increase it, the delay is going to play on for longer. Modulation modulates the delay and gives you some really cool kind of like bassy, drifty effects. Low pass filter, so this is applied to the delay signal itself. So if you have this at 100%, the delay is going to be 100% bright. There's no filtering happening. If you lower it, you're filtering off everything, all of the high frequencies above this point in the and then you have your mix knob. Next up, you have a ping pong delay. Plays each delay note in the left and then to the right, and it alternates between left and right in ping pongs. Diffusion delay is kind of a mix between a delay and a reverb. When you have the modulation set to 0, it functions more like a delay. As you increase the mod setting, it turns into more of a reverb. So if you do like a faster delay time, you have the feedback up and the mod up. It sounds pretty close to like a full-on reverb. I really do wish that in a future update they add a dedicated reverb and a dedicated section for like chorus, flanger, and phaser. You can get a lot out of just using this one delay section. Next up, you have a tape delay. This is meant to emulate an analog tape echo. The tone knob is pretty much the same as the low pass filter knob. The higher you have this up, the brighter your delay is going to be. Phase delay 1. So this combines a delay with a phaser. Your time and feed, which is more of your delay side of the effect, and then you have the rate of the phaser. The mod slider determines how much of the phaser effect takes place. You have mod at 0. Sounds more like a regular delay, but turn it up and then you adjust this knob. You have a phaser, and then you can move these around as you go, kind of fine tune it. So you can get some really trippy effects with this. Over here you have the preset browser, so you have all your factory presets, and then you have your custom presets. To save a preset, you just click on the arrow and choose which folder within the presets main folder to save it to. You can also create your own folder and then save your presets to that. When this is set to assign new, the synthesizer is going to function like a hardware analog synthesizer and use the next available voice. Transpose. So this is by octaves. Drift. This simulates analog drift, common with analog synthesizers. This will create slight pitch drift and nuances. You have 8 voices of polyphony. If you go to 1, then it turns this into a monophonic synthesizer. HQ, high quality mode, turns on oversampling. Over here, you have this menu icon. You can select custom preset folder, UI size, so you can go from 70% to 200%. Next, you have voice section. This is the global tuning. So you can go up or down 12 semitones. I never use this. Glide. Unfortunately, it's only monophonic glide. So you have to have your poly set to 1 for it to work. You have auto re-trigger envelopes mode, and on. The difference between auto and on is the auto will make it so it only glides when you're playing legato, basically when you're morphing from one note to another. On means that it's going to glide 100% of the time, even when you hit the first key. Next up, you have the arpeggiator sequencer section. I only use the arpeggiator. Tempo sync I always have on. This allows you to have the art pitch assigned to all oscillators, just oscillator 1 in sub, just os 1 in os 2, or just oscillator 2. Most of the time I keep it assigned to all oscillators. You have up mode, down mode, up down. You have your tempo, how fast the arpeggiator moves. Range, that's how many octave jumps there are. If it's set to 1, you're going to play at the same octaves continuously. If you have it set to 2, you're going to hear that note jump up 1 octave some of the time. If you have it set to 3, it's going to jump up 2 octaves. And then 4, it's going to jump 3 octaves some of the time. Most of the time, I like to use 2. Pitch bend. This is basically how many semitones you want the pitch to bend up or down. If you move it up 12, it's going to go up and down a full octave. This is for assigning things to your mod wheel. You can link it to LFO1, LFO2, both LFOs, or the filter cutoff. Let's say you choose LFO1. If you don't have LFO1 assigned to anything, it's not going to do anything. What you have to do is assign it to something, set a value, positive or negative. When it's assigned to the mod wheel, even though you have this value here, the LFO is not going to do anything until you move the mod wheel. Aftertouch. With Aftertouch, you have the same drop-down list as the mod wheel, but the thing with Aftertouch is you have to move this slider up along with there being some value set to the LFO for it to work. Let's say you move this up to 100 at 100% pressure, Aftertouch, whatever, it will move the LFO up 36. If you have this at 0, nothing is going to happen. To sum it up, this is a great sounding synth. You could do all the analog type stuff you want, and it has enough extra features that allow you to make sounds that are a little more spacey, kind of modern compared to a vintage synth. There are some improvements could be addressed in a future update, such as having a dedicated chorus and reverb section to go along with the delay. Having more wave shapes would be nice. Something like how they have a saw morphing to pulse. If they could do a triangle morphing to saw and then a triangle morphing to pulse, that would be cool. And then maybe a couple of other shapes that are a little more left field and not found in a standard synthesizer. I would also like to be able to modulate more than these 5 parameters. Modulating the ring, also being able to modulate the drive. If they added a notch filter, if they can make the glide polyphonic just like how they have the Unison. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and make some presets, and like I said in the intro, I will leave these in the description for you to download for free. So when I'm making presets, I usually like to have a MIDI file playing, and that gives me a better idea of how the preset's going to sound in the beat. All right, let's go ahead and make a bass sound. Let's make a pad. let's make a monophonic lead.